Well, welcome everybody to the new dawn for neurodiversity. I'm really excited about this panel today. We've got 4 exceptional women who are representing very, very different stakeholders in this ecology of people that surround this construct of neurodiversity and how it's changing. And before we get started, I just want to get a sense from the audience about who the stakeholders are here and why you came here. And I just wanted to see, like, how many people here would come from a stakeholder position of being a K-12 practitioner, and how many are coming from sort of investment and venture capital, and how many people are coming from technology and the infrastructures of technology, and then how many people came to this session because they have a personal connection with neurodiversity, either as a parent, a friend, or a loved one? I want to make sure that we bring that kind of energy to this panel as well as we think about the diverse perspectives. So when we talk about neurodiversity and how it's changing and how this may actually be a very pivotal moment for thinking about neurodiversity and a lot of hope, I'm wondering, from our panelists, what do you think of as the most hopeful sort of new dawn kind of possibilities that you see happening right about now from your different perspectives? And I wanted to start with Kate, thinking about teletherapy and how things are changing and what you're most hopeful about.
Thanks, Bruce. I think that there is a lot to be hopeful right now. From my perspective as a CEO of a teletherapy services company, you know, we are seeing that using technology and creating environments for learning and engagement and interaction in that context allows us to be much more personalized, you know, and there's a lot, of course, of dialogue around the personalization of learning and the ability to do more of that with technology. And we find that when you can really take care in crafting an environment and adapting an environment to what's working for each child, you can accomplish just exponentially more.
That's great. And Coretta, thinking about like the school systems kind of approach and the IEP system, what are you most hopeful about that you might see changing?
Yes, I think it's a really exciting time. If you've ever been a special education teacher, if you've ever been a teacher, innovation isn't new. You're being innovative every single day, day in and day out, particularly when you're thinking about supporting our most diverse learners. So with this new movement around innovation and technology, similar to what Kate was just naming, there's so much opportunity around how can we leverage technology? How can we leverage communication and the globalization that currently exists because of technology to support all of our learners, and thinking about ways that we can use those same innovative practices that we leaned on before the technology existed, before the software existed, and now leverage them to move faster, be more efficient, and give us more and more ways to be creative to ensure that all students are being reached, we're collaborating with all stakeholders, and that we're really doing what's best for students.
Thank you, that's great. And Sam, from a global accessibility perspective and all the contributions you made in that sector, like what are you most hopeful about in terms of changing around neurodiversity?
There's a lot of hope. There's a changing perspective around neurodiversity. There's a recognition that neurodivergence need not be a thing. Every one of us is neurodiverse, and there's potential in technology with AI coming in, although it has its own drawbacks as well. We have a way of harnessing all that is good, all that is creative in children to help encourage them to thrive in those differences and go ahead in future create innovative organizations. Yeah.
That's great. Maureen, thinking about the larger picture of, you know, the developing workforce as we go from neurodiversity as an education issue to like the future workforce issue, like what do you see as the most hopeful changes that are happening right about now in this moment?
Yeah, it's interesting because usually when people ask me this question, I focus on where things are going in terms of like the accelerating change with technological and the economic change that we see in front of us, and the kinds of skills that employers will increasingly look at as an asset, especially in the age of AI. But and I could talk, you know, for hours about that. But I'm going to take a little bit different of a take on this. I'm going to focus a little bit different, as I wear multiple hats. Some of you may at least know that. I mean, I've trained, did my PhD in this space. I've worked for many years in this space. I'm a parent of two neurodivergent people, and I'm neurodivergent myself. So I have many hats, and I think, honestly, I think the most hopeful thing is I think that we can have conversations today that try to normalize neurodiversity and to say, look, we're all just human beings. Like, there's not this, okay, there's deficient people here and there's, the normal people over there. I mean, it's where we all are humans. We have strengths and weaknesses. And let's have these conversations so that we can make, bring in, include talent and employers, and looking to the future, that we're able to include people that may have historically been excluded.
I think that's a really important point. So I want to introduce one kind of global theme about the new dawn for neurodiversity and why this is such a pivotal moment. And that's this notion of a shift from thinking about and foregrounding the deficit aspects of neurodiversity and foregrounding some of the benefits that happen when we make teaching, when we make education more inclusive environment. In ways it can sort of lift us all up and add strength. So I'm wondering, on this theme, what needs to change and how are we going to change it in order to really capitalize on the tremendous strengths that we can embrace from neurodiversity and kind of opening up those benefits. So I just kind of want to open this up to the panel to think about how can we sort of like unleash the strengths and create benefit for all around by being more inclusive with neurodiversity. What needs to change and how are we going to get there?
I have a thought around that. So definitely in the K-12 space, a concept that comes up often is the idea of designing from the margins and thinking about how do we support all students by actually starting with our students who might be the furthest from being able to achieve that tier 1 instruction. And thinking about if we truly support all students, thinking of our most neurodiverse students and our students who may have challenges with how the status quo curriculum is taught, if we design with them in mind, with them at the forefront, we will then hit all students. So really thinking about, are we writing lesson plans and thinking about how we differentiate and modify for students who are neurodiverse, or are we writing lesson plans for students who are neurodiverse, and then thinking how we ensure that our students who may be atypical or neurotypical neurotypical, how can our students who are neurotypical also access that tier of instruction? So really thinking about how do we design from the margins, think about those students first, let them lead how we go about approaching K-12 and curriculum and instruction, and then making sure that all students have access to that same experience, but putting them really first.
That's a wonderful point. And I would say as an extension, when educators give assessments to students, like I was going around the AIR booths yesterday, there were a lot of assessment-related AI apps. And there was this notion of putting those students within guardrails so that they don't digress from what is expected. So if you continue to keep straitjacketing students, they have their natural inclination to be creative. If we are not able to capture that creativity, if we are not able to capture and manage that diversity, overall we are going to end up in a monoculture and the organizations are going to lose out. So it's a challenge to whoever is an EdTech, particularly AI person in the audience, to try to capture that diversity in thinking and to be able to make students want to do more of that.
I mean, I think that really does highlight, it sort of upends the traditional approach to assessment and evaluation. And, we talk a lot about the importance of meeting children where they are, meeting students where they are. And we have a lot of, somewhat standardized assessments that we have historically believed help us do it. But I mean, Sam, I think you're calling out that can be very dangerous when you start holding everyone to the same standard.
Maureen, picking up on that point, thinking about the strengths that a community or an organization or a workforce gathers by being more inclusive, sort of what comes to mind for you?
With what needs to change?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a lot that needs to change, but I think, what would be really helpful is if there's just broad representation at the leadership tables and in the media. I mean, so I've worked with so many people that there's a lot of even senior executives in companies that aren't disclosing, and we need to just normalize this, that, there shouldn't be shame, right, if someone is neurodivergent. And I think that there should be, I think one of the big challenges is that so many people have only been exposed to like 2 or 3 or maybe 4 openly neurodivergent people in their lives. So they have a really inaccurate viewpoint of what that can look like. What does an autistic person look like? What does an ADHD person look like? And making it safe for people to disclose. And I think, there's lots of things that need to change, but I feel like even people that are in high-level positions are still afraid to disclose, and that just contributes to the problem, because then we all have an inaccurate picture of what neurodivergence is.
Okay, sorry.
But Maureen, I beg to differ in a way that when you say who are the autistic, who are the ADHD, they don't come out of boxes, right? We are all having a little bit of ADHD, a little bit of autism in us. Sometimes one plays up more than the other. And I know you're itching to say something, but you have to wait.
Okay.
So I would say 80% of organizational problems come out of these invisibles in the employees, undisclosed mental states, undisclosed partial ADHDs, partial autisms. Because in my own team, I'm a go-getter. I get a lot of ideas. I start a lot of things. There's another person who's heads down, who wouldn't start anything, but they'll finish everything. What will happen to the team if both of us were not there? Nothing would get done, or there would be no innovation. And then to your point about leaders, I'm so fortunate that in my company, leaders have declared explicitly and have quoted how they have benefited from technology.
So if we take that theme about one of the things that needs to change is the mental models of the people who might not be quite so informed about what neurodiversity is and might not be quite so positioned to be more inclusive. Can you think of strategies or like new developments or new technologies or new possibilities that could sort of lead this sea change in people's understanding of what's possible when being more inclusive?
I don't want to keep talking again and again, but I'm so tempted. Like I told you already, I talk fast. In my company, there is an employee resource group for neurodiversity, and there are allies in it as well, so there's no fear of any privacy being lost. The kind of ideas that are shared over there are amazing, and everybody adopts them. That's a great way to make organizations at least have representations of differences in neuro ways of working of the brain come out. But I think we need to go back to children.
And I think with that, thinking about the K-12 space, we already have a lot of processes in place to identify and support students who are neurodivergent, often through IEP plans and 504s. And my company is called IEP&Me, and we really are working to support schools with increasing the accessibility and collaboration of these plans. What happens is, as special educators, we'll make these plans, we have these ideas, and only we know. How are we ensuring that general education teachers know? How are we ensuring that electives teachers know? Administrators, Sunday school teachers, football coaches, the lady at the front desk at the rec center who signs them in every day when he's supposed to be doing homework. How are we ensuring that everyone is aware of who these students are, what they need to be successful, and how we can really support them? If you have a BIP at school, why do you not have a BIP at Sunday school? Have y'all been to Sunday school? It's a thing. If you need extra breaks, if you need extra time, everyone needs to know that. And thinking, how are we ensuring that the community knows, to your point, Maureen, how are we destigmatizing the idea of being not neurodiverse by just communicating with all the adults in a student's life, in an adult life, that they have this difference and their strategies to support it. We just need to know and then try it out.
Have you guys come across some strategies to get to that goal? Like, how do you take the entire ecosystem that's surrounding a child and kind of inform them and get them sort of like in the know about how they can contribute and what role they can play?
I mean, other than IEP&Me, found at www.iepme.com, other than that, it really is just being on the ground, having those conversations, thinking a lot about general education teachers in particular and classroom teachers. A lot of times, special education, neurodivergency, diversity in general, DEI work, they live in small spaces. They live in small teams, and it's really just where are these conversations not happening and placing yourself there to be sure here is the copy of the IEP. Here is this 504 meeting where we're discussing strategies to support students with ADHD, and thinking about the people who aren't in the know and making sure you're in those spaces to have those conversations.
I think it's also, this might just turn into another plug for IEP&Me, we'll see. But I think that there's certainly a lot of connection between some of those other experts and adults who are working with children and the therapists that we're working with at Presence. And in those targeted therapy sessions in particular, whether that's one-on-one or that's small group, that's where you can really take a strengths-based approach, which is what we've all been talking about, is how do you create those environments to let each child show what they're uniquely good at. It's not all about addressing deficits or or trying to modify an environment. It's how do you really pull out and identify and see their strengths and have them feel their strengths and build their confidence that way. That only goes so far without these types of connecting systems that are feeding that information back to the classroom teachers, to the parents, to all of those other adults that are in the environment. So I think that it's really, you're only going to get the most out of some of those more targeted mechanisms like the one-to-one therapy if we're really paying attention to how we get that information that's uncovered there out throughout the rest of the environments that child's going to be in.
Mm-hmm. One emergent theme that I hear again and again about the role that generative AI is going to play. It's going to be an assistive technology to help humans do their job even better with more humanity and more reach and more impact. I'm wondering ways in which you think this could play out the best, or like what kind of guidance we could give that kind of assistive technology so that it has the most positive impact.
Going to go twice in a row, if that's okay, because I think that is really where digital tools, digital connections can make it a lot more comfortable, I would say, for children to really show who they are, explore what they can do, and so I think that's a big change. It doesn't even necessarily have to be about specific tool that is technology driven so much as just creating these environments that can create more of a comfort zone. I think that's to me really where we see a lot of the advancement.
Just add, I probably most people in this room know what neurodiversity is, but obviously it's a very broad umbrella term, right, for how people that may learn or think differently. Initially, the original definition was more similar to like biodiversity, like we're all different, but we're all human. Just wanted to bring up in terms of the generative AI, so with, say, some neurodivergent typologies like ADHD and autism, generally speaking, there's what we would call like some executive function types of challenges, right? So with organization planning, time management, although so even before generative AI, like technologies, it can be a lifesaver, like just like learning to, put alarms on, so becoming more aware about time management, like it's huge. And I think the future we have in front of us, some of the weaknesses that neurodivergent people have, especially those with executive functioning challenges, are technology is going to kind of make up for those weaknesses, I think, because there's so many things, like you can just start to like train an AI to, pull up all sorts of documents and, organize. There's just lots of those challenges. So I think that it's promising from that perspective as well.
Do you see a role in which these assistive technologies could actually have kind of a networking or community effect to able to enable the entire community that surrounds a child to work better as a team or work more effectively together. Have you seen examples of this, or do you have hopes for how this could happen?
So that's also a feature on IEP&Me, but that really is important, this idea of like how can we, once these documents once these plans are created, once these ideas are put in place, how can we continue that collaboration during the implementation part of these plans in schools or in work plans for adults in the workplace? How are we giving input and feedback on what's going well? What accommodations are working? What modifications may have existed in one environment that don't work in a different environment? Or what accommodation works in one and should be tried out in a different environment? So it's really about building those collaboration tools to support neurodivergence in the classroom and thinking about how generative AI can then eventually, hopefully, pull some of that strong data that we're able to collect and then give some either high quality recommendations or get us to a point where we can make some decisions a little bit more efficiently in order to support all students.
But then,
Do you want to follow up on that, or shall I? Okay.
yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay. Thinking about the incredible mashup between this disruption that's happening in artificial intelligence and education, there's a lot of really, really challenging issues that come up around how do you protect a vulnerable population from a force which is, being fed by billion-dollar industries that are trying to all get a leg up on one another. It's being driven by venture capital, and yet at the heart of this is perhaps one of the most vulnerable populations within education. I think that the world needs to think about what are the guardrails, what are the ways in which we can protect them, and I'm wondering from each of your own perspectives, what you envision is the most important protections that we want to have in place, and what are the deepest sort of threats that we might kind of envision now?
So I'd like to go first, because I'm kind of going to say the similar thing to what I was thinking of saying earlier. So there's always this decision-making involved in systems in some way or the other. We know statistical bias. We know how we need to represent everybody. We know how we need to label everybody. I mean, all different types of data. There's something called statistical discrimination, which is not heard very often. What it results from is minority data, data that's very far away statistically from being similar to other data or normal, what is called as normal data. So when this happens, whatever decisions the system makes, these outliers are not included because the statistical reasoning underlying that decision making excludes these outliers. How it also harms is because when those decisions are implemented by the system, the outliers become like flagged as, the errants. Like for example, suppose somebody takes a long time to type because they can't think fast. When they are typing their login and password, the system might time out. Or if somebody does their online actions differently in an office, then because their digital footprint is different from the normal, they could be flagged as a cyber security threat. There are so many ways in which this can play out until and unless the AI tech people are aware of this and they make sure that all these are taken care of. There are ways of doing that, but it's important to be aware.
Because I have a really different take on this, but hey, people can disagree with me, that's fine. I think the true vulnerability is organizations that don't include people with different kinds of minds. We're entering an era where linear thinking in all forms will probably be completely taken over in the next 15 years. And within neurodivergence, there's obviously huge variance, there's different support needs, but there's also uncommon skills. Often that go along with neurodivergence, and not always, but there is an overrepresentation of skills that won't be replicated by AI with lateral thinking, with nonlinear thinking, systems thinking, and again, there's all sorts of nuances with what kinds of neurodivergence we're talking about. But as far as I'm concerned, that we're entering a future where there's a kind of arrogance and not an appreciation for how fast things are going to accelerate and change and how much cognitive work is going to be taking over. And that includes lots of linear cognitive work. We're not used to that. We're not prepared for that, not in higher education, not in the workforce, and that should disrupt things in a way that opens doors to doing things truly different and truly appreciating different kinds of minds. And to me, that's the big vulnerability, and people need to understand where things are headed.
I 1000% agree with that. I think that's really big. And when we're thinking about the EdTech space, specifically, I would say, look at your teams. If you don't have a neurodiverse person on your product team, how are you ensuring that your product is right for neurodiverse workers and learners? So if we're moving in this direction where we're really putting neurodivergence in the forefront and we're building tools to support these students, have we hired what they look like in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years? And we saw a little bit with this when organizations who were new to DEI, who were just starting to get in diversity and inclusion, they were really intentional of like, okay, we need to bring in Black voices, we need to bring in Latinx voices. We have to think of this as another affinity of neurodiversity. Are you bringing in neurodiverse voices as you're building out your products? Are you bringing in neurodiverse individuals when you're thinking about how we collaborate? What accommodations do you need at work? How do I create a workplace environment that supports all types of workers? Because we all love kids. We have to love them when they turn 18, 19, 20 as well. And if you need tips, check out Maureen's book on what that can look like, because it's really, really crucial.
I'd also just add and maybe this is more from a K-12 lens, thinking about children, but just another reminder that it's not all about AI and AI developed tools as well. And I think of a couple of other things that I think are really important to remember about sort of safety and how we develop technology or use technology in the educational environment is, really the same as what I'd say, regardless of neurodivergence. It's important to give kids opportunities to practice communicating in the digital world, and for them to learn how those interactions go, what's comfortable, what's not, what's real, what's not. And I think secondly, just the importance of keeping the adults who are there to help them learn involved, right? Like using technology as a tool for supporting the adults that support the children, I think is really another, maybe increasingly important thing as the technology itself gets more powerful.
Yeah. So that's interesting. And on one hand, inclusion is an incredibly important force and opportunity and learning opportunity for neurodiverse children. But at the same time, the technology, the infrastructure, the teletherapy is an incredible resource to help them. How do you see those two things optimally come together so that they benefit the children the most? Like, what kind of aspects would you want the teletherapy and the assistive technologies to focus on? And what would you like to see really be more in the inclusion, kind of like interaction kind of set?
Yeah, that's a really good question. To me, I think it really is always the technology that is developed to support the adults who are supporting the children is where it can be the most powerful, and that can and is becoming more and more sophisticated in pointing the adults to what might be the most helpful thing to do or offer at any given moment or in any given interaction. I think that's where I get most excited about the development, is when it's really developing tools for the educators, for the therapists, as opposed to thinking about sort of paths for independent work.
I think also IEPs stand for individualized education plans, and really thinking about the individual student. Some folks coming out of the pandemic, online learning was a disaster. No, online learning was a disaster for some, for even many. But really thinking, what does this individual student need? Do they need in-person occupational therapy, but could benefit from telehealth for speech pathology? Really thinking about that individual student and what they need, and not trying to make too many blanket decisions for all students, because even within neurodiversity, you can give me 10 students with ADHD, and many of you probably know this, you're gonna get 10 completely different students with 10 completely different sets of needs. So really going back to that individual part and thinking, what does this individual need, and how can we leverage different technologies and add it to their plans for that assistive technology piece?
Well, and I think, sorry, it's a very quick add. I think it's very telling in these post-pandemic years. We are seeing, so we work with a lot of the large, fully virtual schools across the country, and they are seeing their enrollment among neurodiverse populations, among children with IEPs, with 504s, is just ballooning as a portion of their population. And I think it's really connected to that there may be more ways that you can really personalize and individualize the education in that environment.
I'm going to go all out and challenge the very thinking.
Here Sam goes. You see her? Go ahead, Sam.
It could sound utopian to some people, but it's not. I sit on the technical committees in Canada for AI, accessible and equitable AI, as well as for ICT. We adopted the ICT standards from Europe, but we are modifying it. The deficit framing is being moved to a functional framing. What I mean is, why do we say there are ADHD students with ADHD, there are autistic students, they have some deficits. Instead of that, why don't we focus on the strengths? Be cognizant of what they need as well, but focus on the strengths and nurture those strengths so that the whole ideology transforms. We have seen many such transformations. 30, 40 years ago, there were institutions where people with disabilities used to live. It's getting more and more normalized. We are able to accept diversity in the visible area, in the visible part, like age, gender, race. When it comes to the head, or within the head, we need to accept that there are different people with different brain structures and accept their strengths and make their strengths flourish.
For sure, I think it's an and, definitely. And to Maureen's point earlier, we have to leverage, linear thinking is going to be very beneficial in our future, and as we're thinking through what the workplace is going to look like very soon. And there are areas that might seem more challenged based on your neurodiversity or just who you are as an individual generally. Being able to make quick decisions, really, really helpful, but you might be late. Right? You see that a lot with neurodiverse individuals. So there's always going to be really great benefits. And I couldn't get here at 3:15, right? So there's certain times where there are skills that you might need support with, regardless. So knowing that it's definitely an and.
Which is why you need team members to compensate in a workplace.
Right, and I would say the strength-based perspective, I think, unleashes, the potential of everyone, and then along with that, whether you're neurodivergent or not, having support, making you're in environments where there's support that's available as needed. I've worked in with wraparound support programs and transition programs like high school to college and college to work, which have been really effective. And I think so. It's kind of like the combination, right? If we could change how we think, where we're coming from a strength-based perspective and we're providing support as needed.
So we're coming into the final 6 minutes, and I wanted to kind of help us as an audience really imagine from your own perspective. We're facing a world in which the cognitive capacities of what work is going to look like and what it means to be sort of like a productive workforce is being massively disrupted and kind of reinvented. And at the same time, the education of the inclusive education of neurodiverse individuals is also changing really, really rapidly. And I'm wondering if you see a way in which these two disruptions can actually work together synergistically, and if there's a role in that change to be led by the autonomous community of the students that are experiencing this.
I do a lot of work in the community college system. I'm actually I graduated high school early myself and was a community college student. Now I'm a trustee at the same college I got my start at, and I was former president of my state association. I think there's, we're entering an era where there's sort of like what I know a lot of people have said they're sort of like this blurring the lines, right? I think you're some of like higher ed and workforce development, and I think there are opportunities, for disruption and neurodivergent students. A really large percentage of neurodivergent students begin their higher ed journey at community colleges. So I think that's a natural place to be having some of these conversations at least. And there's apprenticeships, there's all sorts of, I think, paid internships. So I have a program that, there's paid internships with wraparound support programs. So I think, but in general, I think like these closer relationships and partnerships between higher ed and industry, and then, wraparound supports and support, I think that combination, that there's a lot of potential.
And I think providing tools for self-advocacy to grow for students in K-12 to grow their ability for self-advocacy, and providing them even EdTech tools for that is going to be very important.
Yeah. Sam, you called out before what this really calls for is moving away from those like deficit-based definitions. So I would just say for these two worlds almost have to converge. You have to really significantly disrupt the entire K-12 education system to align to something that is really strengths-based. I mean, that's not how IEPs are built. It's not how 504s are built. Like but they are important, and they're there to protect and support. And I think it's, I do not have the answer, and it would take more than 3 minutes, even if I did, right, to say what it's going to be. But I think even just this dialogue is convincing me more and more. You've got to really, I think, fully upend that system. Curious, Coretta, you're going to get the final word on what we should do about the IEP construct. But I do feel you'd have to do something pretty dramatic to have it really steer and point to a more strengths-based approach.
Yeah, I think the strengths-forward approach and just the communication amongst all stakeholders is going to be really, really important when we're thinking about K to gray, like really thinking about all the way from the beginning of school through the workforce. And also leveraging, you've heard it 1,000 times, I'm sure, today, leveraging artificial intelligence and technology. It's not going anywhere. In 2005, there was this article, I was in college, CNN dropped an article and it was said, I think the headline was, "Email is damaging brains more than pot." And I was like, now what? And Erin from Innovate EDU earlier at lunch, she had said something like, you don't go into class saying, all right, it's internet time. It just is. AI just will be very, very soon. It's trendy now, but these conferences 20 years ago, they were talking about email and internet the same way we're talking about AI. It's not going anywhere. The quicker we can embrace it and figure out how we can use artificial intelligence, large language models, generative tools to support neurodivergent learners, the faster we can get ahead, we'll have an even playing field. Because as many of you know, special education has always been a little bit behind general education when it comes to innovation. Now in the K-12 space, we all found out 2 years ago, or a year ago at best, So we now have this level playing field. How can we get ahead and ensure that we're really supporting our learners with this new construct?
Thank you. That's a great contribution. One last note, kind of ending on a note of hope. One of the stakeholders that we touched on in the very beginning when I asked, like, who's a parent or a loved one of somebody who's struggling with neurodiversity. Here we are at this conference focusing on this new dawn for neurodiversity. What message of hope would you have for those parents about what they might be looking forward to in this new era?
Go down the line.
Go down the line as our final farewell.
I think we were talking about this beforehand, just how there's nothing more there's nothing more passionate than a parent looking to create an optimal environment for their child to succeed. And I think there's way more options, an overwhelming amount of options. But I actually think for a parent looking to find that right personalized solution, there's more choice than ever.
Yeah, I would also say information is now accessible in a way that wasn't before with these different generative models. Do the research, do the learning, and be a part of the process. There's so much more opportunity now for collaboration, where when we have neurodivergent students in our school settings, as they transition to their post-secondary choice, you can really be a part of that conversation to not let school happen to you, but really create the environment and the situation for your students so that they're successful.
Yeah, advocate collectively and be heard in the AI tech world so that AI is built properly.
Really, so we got 9 seconds. So I think having been involved in this field for several decades, I'd say that I'm most hopeful now because there's a global community of neurodivergent people and that there's leaders now, there's people in leadership positions that are now, paving the way for younger generations to feel comfortable with who they are.
Thank you. And rather than mansplain the central points that were just made, I think that they spoke quite well for themselves. So I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.